Okay, so on October 3rd, 2018, I received a text from my sister Jillian that my brother-in-law Mike was going to the emergency room via ambulance due to a fever of 106. He had been diagnosed with a kidney infection and given antibiotics for treatment. But when Mike woke up that day, he didn't know where he was, who my sister Jillian was, or who their 4-year-old son was. The fear that struck Jillian was unimaginable. Of course, resorting to the internet and the plethora of information that it brings, we read that a high fever can cause confusion. So upon entering the emergency room, Jillian thought they would be given a stronger antibiotic and sent home later that day. And this was actually that day when our journey began. Upon my arrival to the emergency room, Mike was asleep and they were running numerous tests. Their first diagnosis was meningitis. The three of us were quarantined pretty much, and this is the first room that they put us in. Tests came back and meningitis was ruled out. At this time, the doctors knew at this specific hospital that whatever was going on was outside of their scope, and it wasn't just a fever causing him to be now unresponsive. In an effort to get him the best treatment possible, the doctors recommended that he be transferred to the neurological ICU in Charlotte, North Carolina. So on Mike's 38th birthday, he was transferred to the neuro ICU and put on life support. And this was that day. This is when our panic set in. And I think that everybody can admit that the unknown is scary. Seeing the confusion on the face of the doctors and nurses can cause frustration, fear, sadness, and for me, it was anger. I didn't like seeing him like this. I didn't like seeing my sister Jillian worried about how she was going to tell her 4-year-old son that daddy did not come home from that doctor visit. Mike was diagnosed with viral encephalitis, cause unknown. Encephalitis, the word did not mean anything to any of us. We looked around, and I think that day I looked up how many times how to spell it. And to be quite honest, it wasn't something that the nurses saw often. Some of them hadn't seen it ever before. To this day, he still has tests being run at the Mayo Clinic because this strand of the virus is still yet to be named. The virus attacked his brain and his brainstem. Neurologists did not have many answers because it was a very uncommon diagnosis here in the United States. They teleconferenced with doctors all over the world. And then they said the line that we've heard multiple times. It's a virus, it has to run its course. They told us when his body was done fighting the virus, he would come back to us. I remember many times Jillian would maybe leave the room if we had to make her and force her out. We said, nothing is gonna happen if you leave this room. And at one point, I would hold his hand and I would beg him to squeeze mine just to let me know he was still in there and to keep my hope alive. At one point, I begged him to trade places with me because seeing my family and my sister in this amount of pain and not being able to fix it was agonizing. But in times like these, the best way that I found to cope and to help those around me is humor and making everyone smile and laugh. At one point, we were all gathered in his hospital room and he was still unresponsive. And my stepfather looked and said, "Hey, Mike, keep it down over there. You're being too loud." And I always said, "Stop trying to talk over me," and things like that. To some, it may be strange, but the smile it produced from Jillian and my mom was long awaited. To this day, I still ask Mike why he was giving me the silent treatment for all those days. The day came, of course, that he opened his eyes, and this is what you're seeing here. My sister was in shock and understandably so excited. Of course, Mike doesn't remember these days. He doesn't remember essentially the whole month of October of last year. And this is where the fight got a bit harder. Mike hadn't walked in weeks. He lost a lot of muscle, couldn't move his arms, and couldn't swallow. And yes, the virus started to exit, but now he had to relearn tasks that many of us consider second nature. He doesn't remember the weeks of people stretching him out, moving his arms, using a machine to get him up in a wheelchair. And that's what you're seeing here. But we remember, and I remember the excitement my sister exuded when he opened his eyes. I remember the tears that formed when he wiggled his toes. I remember the nod he gave our friend when our friend said to him, "You're going to be okay." I remember the cheers when the therapist sat him up. I remember telling him that my sister and I knew for a fact that his doctor enjoyed expensive red wine and yachting, because we really ran out of things to talk about at that point. I think that's also when the first eye roll took place, which was a sign to me that my brother-in-law was back. Maybe not how he was before, but that didn't matter. For the rest of our lives, we will never take a wiggle of a toe, a thumbs up, or a nod for granted. After weeks of life support, a trach, feeding tubes, stretches, and days where he couldn't do what he did just the day before, he was getting out of the neuro ICU and he was going to rehab. While his brain was trying to understand what happened, why it happened to him, and wondering if he'll ever feel the same again. In rehab, they have informed him that it would take about 2 weeks to walk a few hundred feet with the support of a walker. With the support of with our support, the encouragement and love from family, friends, and his biggest supporter, my sister, he knew it was time to push himself. He didn't want to be the norm. He wanted to be the exception to the norm. And this positivity, I believe, is what allowed him to walk the hallways without the support of a walker within those first 2 weeks. And so this is in the neuro ICU, sitting up, and his first steps with the walker while he was in rehab. And they took him to learn his everyday tasks, and they put him in an atmosphere where when he got home, he would be able to reach up and make coffee. He would be able to open the fridge and find what he needed. Mike, Jillian, and their 4-year-old son have worked for a year to become accustomed to their new normal. It was a transition that none of them expected, but they took it head on and fought every day. Mike experiences some memory loss and inability to concentrate in different situations, and frustration that he can't do the tasks like he did before. Encephalitis welcomed itself into his life, but he has vowed to never give up and never give in. My sister, as a caretaker, still deals with the trauma of it all, and again, dealing with the unknown throughout the process. The truth is, there's a lack of encephalitis education and preparedness. There were a minimal amount of psychologists that understood his traumatic brain injury, which resulted in quite a search who understood the disease and was comfortable treating somebody who has suffered and survived it. But this story and my excitement, I want to bring you hope. So this is me on the left, my sister and Mike. We took him outside into the garden. This is him. He was pulling himself up and really getting his muscles back. He now works out at home, and I apologize, I cut off a little there. And just last week, if you'll notice on the cookie cake, this is Mike and my son. They share the same birthday. And Mike's cake said happy 38th and 39th birthday, because we had a lot to celebrate this year. So I'm going to stop sharing and just a few more things. Whether you're suffering from encephalitis, whether you're a caregiver, a family member, a doctor, or a researcher trying to find the most suitable way to treat or prevent this disease, keep fighting and don't give up. You have support around you. We're here in the US now working to help spread awareness any way possible. And to those currently diagnosed that have survived but are living with after effects, you know the beauty of life and the preciousness of each day. So celebrate achievements, because once again, if anything, my family learned, and many of our close friends learned, the importance of a squeeze of a hand, which may seem trivial to some of us, but it's major. We're proud of you. We support you through trials and tribulations. And to the caregivers or the family members and the friends, we know the fear and helplessness you feel day by day, but the little things, like the wiggle of those toes, will give you more and more hope. And please don't stop fighting and pushing forward. Be assertive and ask for explanations. When you're unsure what the doctors are telling you, ask those questions. I had a tendency to be very pushy, and I wanted explanations. I didn't want doctor language, because nodding my head and then sitting there saying, What did he just tell us was not helping us at all. Questions are the only way to better understand what they're telling us about our loved ones. Doctors, thankful for doctors for everything they do and dedication to the awareness of encephalitis. My hope is that the awareness spreads so every doctor is knowledgeable of the symptoms, treatment, and aftercare. And finally, for the researchers and everybody in this society, again, thank you for welcoming me in. And I am so proud to be part of the fight to spread this awareness and keep researching the causes, the treatments, and spreading education, because all of us joined together are building our future. And we have the motivation and dedication to ensure that encephalitis is on the map. And I can tell you personally, just like Mike, I won't be giving up and I won't be giving in anytime soon.